Across the entire world, few nations treat their fighter aircraft with the deadly seriousness of Sweden. It's a place with less than 1/100th of the defense budget of the United States, just one person for every 134 people in China, none of the military-industrial autocracy of Russia, and little to no involvement in the fighter jet initiatives of the European Union. Yet, from the revolutionary Draken to the groundbreaking Viggen, little Sweden has proven that it's a natural talent in building fighter aircraft that can stand alongside the best on the planet. And in all of the storied history of Swedish fighter aircraft, there is only one plane that can rightfully be regarded as its masterwork: the JAS-39 Gripen. Fast, nimble, and armed to the teeth, the Gripen stands alongside some of the very best aircraft of the modern day, with a near spotless track record in operation and a price tag that few aircraft of its quality can even hope to match. Coming up on 3 decades of continuous service, the Gripen is getting better and better, with a rapidly strengthening claim as the best non-stealth fighter on Earth. Today, we're going to look under the hood, check out the fire and brimstone carried on its pylons, and explore the past, present, and very bright future of this masterpiece of Swedish engineering. To find the genesis of the aircraft known as the Gripen, we've got to turn the clock back to the late 1970s to visit a world that's really rather different from the one that we know today. At the time, the Scandinavian nation of Sweden was sworn to a military policy upheld by 2 central pillars: strict and total military neutrality and the principle of so-called total defense. Despite the Cold War around them, Sweden would not align itself with either side by joining NATO, becoming part of the Soviet Union, or maintaining other formalized alliances with Washington or Moscow. But nor would they sit by and simply allow war to happen to them if either side wished. In the interest of maintaining their own neutrality by force, especially against the nearer and more diplomatically unfriendly Soviet Union, Sweden had spent the years after World War II building a very strong, technologically self-sufficient military relative to its size. The purpose was not to prevent Sweden from being defeated in a head-to-head confrontation with a Soviet war machine that would undoubtedly wipe it out in the end. Instead, the goal was to make an invasion of Sweden so obviously costly for an attacker that it would be deemed to be not worth the trouble. To that end, Sweden took it upon itself to not just purchase, but design and manufacture a broad range of warfighting tools, and especially combat aircraft. After a pair of early models, the Tunnan and the Lansen, brought Stockholm into the jet age, Sweden came out with its first really impressive fighter, the Draken. We reference the Draken not just to give a little history lesson, but to explain just how early Sweden began setting the standard for cutting-edge fighter design. When it went into service in 1960, the Draken was the first so-called double-delta combat aircraft to go operational in the whole world, the first combat aircraft to perform the Cobra maneuver, and the first fully supersonic aircraft to ever be deployed to Western Europe. Its successor, the Viggen, was introduced to service in 1971 and became both the first mass-produced aircraft of any kind to use front winglets called canards, and the first to ever carry a digital central computer, making it quite possibly the world's most advanced warplane at that time. At the end of the 1970s and the start of the 1980s, new worldwide aircraft like America's F-16 and the Soviet MiG-29 entered service. As a result, it became abundantly clear to the Swedish Air Force that it would need a new fighter of its own if it was going to keep up with the rapid technological advancement of the era. And if Sweden was going to endeavor to build a new fighter aircraft at all, then whatever new piece of kit it was going to come up with wouldn't just have to be flyable, it would have to keep up the legacy of technological advancement, high performance, and clear fighting utility that the Swedish Air Force was known for, and it would have to do that not solely for reasons of national pride. For Sweden, developing such advanced, even groundbreaking equipment, it came with a catch. Every time the country embarked on such an endeavor, it had one shot to get it right. Funding its projects all alone, Sweden could handle the staggering expenditures required to develop and indigenously produce a fighter jet, but not that often, and not more than one at a time. Not only that, but if Sweden's new fighter didn't do the job like it was supposed to, then Sweden would be left practically undefended against cutting-edge adversary technology until a new fighter could be funded, designed, and mass-produced from scratch. The vision that Sweden's leaders put forth for their new aircraft was one that would put it on par with the best modern aircraft of that era. They were looking for a Mach 2 capable fighter jet with optimization to carry modern weaponry, plus the newest onboard technologies from fly-by-wire controls to radar tracking and battlefield awareness to the use of new aerodynamic design principles and building materials. It would have to satisfy a range of requirements to ensure that it could pull its weight as Sweden's one and only modern fighter, including the ability to serve in a truly multi-role capacity and the ability to leverage a less costly single-engine design without losing power. Finally, it would have to be optimized in a way that would ensure that it could fight the sorts of battles Sweden planned to engage in. That meant being able to take off and land using short stretches of Swedish freeway that are meant to function as remote landing strips and temporary bases in times of crisis. Moreover, the aircraft would have to be easy to train young conscripts with and easy to maintain for inexperienced mechanics, all while it could be turned around quickly from one combat mission to another. After all, these were aircraft meant to deploy across the nation at short notice and defend areas in small, self-sufficient groups in what could very well become a last-ditch defense of Swedish territory. The nation would consider several design proposals from the Saab company, including an attack aircraft called the Saab 38 and a significantly upgraded Viggen called the A-20, as well as competing offers from foreign nations. The Americans offered the F-16 and the F-A-18 and the upgraded F-20 Tiger Shark, while the French offered the Mirage 2000. Finally, though, the Swedes went with a design called the JAS 39, a single-seater design with front canards, little winglets below and behind the cockpit, plus a design that was intentionally made to be aerodynamically unstable, something that a pilot could address with the aid of fly-by-wire technology. It got its name via public competition in Sweden, the Gripen, the Swedish name for the mythical half-lion, half-eagle beast, the Gripen. The first Gripen prototype rolled out in 1987, less than 5 years after the design and development program began. It wouldn't fly until 18 months later, as its builders worked out issues with its flight controls, but on the 9th of December 1988, test pilot Stig Holmstrom blasted Sweden's new fighter into the sky for the first time. The flight testing sequence wasn't easy by any means. A prototype crash injured another test pilot, requiring over a year of delays, and a couple of years later, an airframe was destroyed in an aerial display for the public in Sweden. Luckily, that pilot survived as well. Flight testing would not conclude until the mid-1990s, and it took even longer for Sweden to decide on how to arm the thing, but despite the setbacks, Sweden had decided nonetheless that the Gripen was the way of the future. All its flight issues seemed as if they could be worked out. And in the time it took to get the aircraft into production, Saab had already been able to put a successor variant, the C and D versions, to replace the A and B versions that Sweden started with. Known as the Turbo Gripen, the C and D integrated in-flight refueling capabilities, onboard oxygen regeneration, modern avionics, and much more. The Gripen hadn't been an easy project. Its delays, cost overruns, and early crashes had made it seem as if the plane might be dead on arrival, while a bribery scandal led to a major public relations problem back home. But by the late 1990s, the ranks of the Swedish Air Force were swelling with their first batch of Gripens, and nothing short of excellence would follow from there. Like most other modern combat aircraft, the Gripen has gone through a number of design revisions over time, culminating in the Gripen's case with 3 key iterations: the A/B, the C/D, and the E/F, simple enough. Now, look, we'll skip the details on the A and B iteration, as they've mostly been upgraded, and instead we'll examine the stats for the C and D, the Gripen currently in broadest use across the world. The Gripen registers an overall length of 14.9 meters tip to tail. That's just under 49 feet for the single-seater C variant. The two-seater D is just a hair longer. The Gripen's wingspan stretches out at 8.4 meters or 27.5 feet, giving it a slightly smaller profile than America's F-16 or China's J-10, and a far smaller frame than the F-15 or Russia's Su-27. Sitting empty, it weighs in at just barely less than 15,000 pounds, that's 6,800 kilos, with a maximum takeoff weight of a bit over double that, or 14,000 kilos or 31,000 pounds. Of that weight, the Gripen can carry up to 5,300 kilograms or 11,700 pounds of payload, depending on how much fuel it's carrying. It's a single-engine fighter, relying on a Volvo turbofan engine with afterburners, producing 18,100 pound thrust of force while firing at maximum strength. Slicing through the air, the Gripen can hit a top speed twice the speed of sound, while at altitude, that's 2,100 miles an hour or 1,300 miles per hour. Flying through thicker air at sea level, it caps out at Mach 1.2, or 1,470 kph, or 913 mph. The Gripen pushes a substantial combat range of 800 kilometers, 500 miles, uncommon for a fighter jet at its size, while it can manage a journey of 3,200 kilometers or 2,000 miles while on a non-combat flight with full fuel. The Gripen tops out at a service ceiling of 15,240 meters or 50,000 feet, and it's capable of withstanding 9 times the force of gravity during tight maneuvers, on par with the very best fighters on Earth. Of all the Gripen's performance stats, however, the most impressive of all is its ability to take off and land on exceptionally short runways. To land, the Gripen needs a straightaway of just half a kilometer. That's 500 meters, that's 1,640 feet. To take off, it needs even less, 400 meters, or barely 1,300 feet. It can perform these takeoffs from all manner of austere runways, including strips of automobile freeway built for that very purpose, and can even take off and land with a layer of snow on the ground. In terms of its armament, the Gripen poses a formidable challenge for even the best adversary fighters. On a respectable set of 8 hardpoints, the Gripen can carry up to 6 short-range air-to-air missiles, including the European Iris-T, the American Sidewinder, and the joint South African and Brazilian A-Data. They can carry up to 4 Meteor or AMRAAM missiles to engage air targets beyond visual range, along with a selection of air-to-ground and air-to-ship missiles, or a variety of precision-guided and unguided bombs. For reconnaissance, the Gripen can graft on a range of external sensor pods made in Sweden, France, and elsewhere, while for electronic warfare purposes, it became the first aircraft to operate an expendable radio frequency jammer developed by the Italian company Leonardo, known as the Bright Cloud. Behind the stick, Gripen pilots can rely on a heads-up display and other modern tech, while for close-range engagements, the aircraft's 27mm revolver cannon will get the job done. The aircraft is renowned for its ease of maintenance, ease of training relative to its capabilities in flight, and its ability to be combat-ready at the drop of a hat. A Gripen returning from an air-to-air engagement can land, be refueled, rearmed, and serviced by a team of 5 conscripts and a technician, and take off again to re-enter the fight in a span of just 10 minutes. And although the Gripen C/D is already impressive, we've got to talk about the sheer power and performance of the latest Gripen variant, the Gripen E/F. The new generation aircraft first flew in 2017 and was only delivered to its first global air forces in 2021, meaning that it integrates all the bells and whistles that 21st century technology can provide. The new aircraft is just a bit longer and wider, with the latest copies expected to feature new trapezoidal wings to enhance its carrying capacity. The E/F is about 1,200 kilograms or 2,600 pounds heavier while sitting empty, and can fly weighing 2,500 kilos or 5,500 pounds more than the C/D at maximum. Those changes come courtesy of its new engine, a new iteration of the General Electric F414, which can push the jet to a higher service ceiling while providing better range, owed to a greater fuel efficiency combined with a higher fuel capacity than it had previously. But the real improvements on the E/F are its armament and onboard technologies. Not only does it feature 10 hardpoints rather than its predecessor's 8, but its avionics are upgraded to a standard similar to that of a 5th-generation fighter like the American F-35A. Those avionics now include top-of-the-line radar, the first of its kind to be able to swivel and increase its field of view leftward or rightward rather than being fixed in place. Among other things, that allows the Gripen to fire radar-guided missiles like the Meteor and guide the missile through an adversary aircraft's radar blind spots while still maintaining a radar fix of its own. The new Gripen offers advanced electronic warfare capabilities, 360-degree spherical battlefield awareness, onboard artificial intelligence, and advanced tools to heighten the cockpit awareness of the pilot. The aircraft can integrate with smart weapons to change targets after they're fired, verify hits on target, and more, while its onboard systems are entirely NATO interoperable. One of the E/F's most under-the-radar but very important attributes is its so-called decoupled architecture. This allows all of its software and hardware technologies to run separate from one another. As a result, the aircraft's critical functions are practically immune from being impacted by bugs or problems elsewhere within its onboard systems, and all its applications can be swapped in and out for new advanced alternatives as they become available. To hear Saab tell it, the goal is to provide avionics and tech so adaptable that a pilot can go out and fight the first day of an air war, use the data it collects, and swap out and optimize its systems to give it a massive advantage by the time it returns to the fight on day 2. Most impressive of all on the Gripen E/F are its stealthy attributes. While the aircraft does not classify as a stealth aircraft, it uses a digital cloak to present the smallest radar cross-section of any Western non-stealth fighter, and certainly any within the current NATO arsenal, although it may be surpassed by the upcoming Korean-made KF-21 Boromai if it's introduced to Polish service as expected. The E/F doesn't just employ stealthy features either. Its onboard algorithms can identify items with a tiny radar return and can figure out whether they're 5th-generation adversaries with a far greater degree of precision than was possible some years ago. In its operational role, the Gripen forms the cornerstone of the Swedish Air Force, serving as its one and only combat aircraft. Sweden flies over 70 C variants for frontline multi-role service, 23 D variant trainer models, and it'll eventually pick up a minimum of 60 E and F variants, if not more so, for an eventual operational force of 120 Gripens at least. In Swedish service, the plane has luckily not had to take part in any of the major invasions or continent-wide conflicts for which it was intended. The Soviet Union has fallen, Sweden has joined NATO, and modern Russia won't be equipped to square up with the European continents for at least a few more years. As a result, the Gripen hasn't yet had to prove itself in lethal head-to-head engagements, although it's performed quite favorably in exercises against a wide range of NATO aircraft. During exercises in 2006 in Alaska, the Gripen scored 10 kills against 0 losses in simulated exercises, taking out several F-16s and a Eurofighter Typhoon. In another exercise in Sweden, a single Gripen intercepted 3 F-15Cs and shot down 2 of them, notching a substantial victory against an aircraft with a 104-0 air-to-air kill ratio. In 2011, Sweden deployed several Gripens to Libya to enforce a no-fly zone, logging 650 combat missions by October of that year. At the time of writing, however, no Gripen has logged a real air-to-air kill during combat. Yet despite its unproven status around the world, the Gripen has shown itself to be an ideal fit for nations that aren't looking to actively seek out wars with any adversaries, instead seeking reliable, high-performance fighters for the purposes of national defense. By 2010, the Gripen had logged well over 140,000 flight hours in active service without a single instance of engine trouble across any airframe. Although the aircraft has endured a small handful of crashes and airframe losses, only one pilot has ever died behind the stick in a 2017 incident at a Thai air show. Aside from that incident, the aircraft has proven a spotless record in protecting its pilots and operators. Meanwhile, its operators around the world have enjoyed the Gripen's exceptional versatility in grafting on armaments. Although the base design is intended to operate a relatively narrow selection of missiles and bombs, it's able to graft on weapons sourced from all over the globe, depending on the needs and current inventory of an international customer. And speaking of those customers, the Gripen has quickly become a beloved addition to air forces around the world. Brazil intends to operate a total of 36 E/F airframes, possibly raising that number to over 50 in due time. Thailand currently flies 11, with the intent to operate as many as 25, while South Africa flies 26 of the aircraft. The Czech Republic and Hungary each operate a squadron of the planes, and the United Kingdom operates trainer versions to teach its test pilots. Everywhere it goes, the Gripen is lauded for its safety record, ease of use, high performance, and versatility. Even more impressive, Saab has proven that no two nations' Gripen aircraft have to be alike, and they've done an excellent job of modifying the Gripen design to fit the needs of individual customers as they're shipped around the world. Not only that, but the Gripen offers one of the lowest cost per flight hour rates in the world, with Jane's Aerospace and Defense Consulting giving the Gripen the top spot for flight hour affordability at rates almost 50% better than the next cheapest option, one particular block model of the F-16. At the time of writing, it appears that the Gripen may be entering a bit of a renaissance over the next few years. In the past, it's lost out to aircraft like the Eurofighter Typhoon, the F-16V variants, the F-35 Lightning, and the French Rafale, among others. Those contracts have gone to other aircraft for a few reasons, sometimes relating to concerns about the Gripen C/D variant's ability to deal with stealthy adversaries in 21st century combat, and sometimes relating to the C/D's projected obsolescence or slow rates of production. But now that the E/F variant has come along, and other nations like Brazil are looking to set up additional production lines of their own, the Gripen is looking more and more attractive to global clients. India is currently considering the purchase of up to 114 copies of the Gripen. The Philippines are likely to acquire at least a dozen, and 15 or so other world nations have expressed interest in the product. The most notable among them would be Ukraine, for whom Sweden has already allotted a handful of Gripens that it would be more than happy to donate to Ukraine's cause. There's been a good deal of pushback on the idea from elsewhere in Europe, with defense experts on the continent pointing out that Ukraine's having a hard enough time mastering the F-16 and supplying enough pilots. But the Gripen's proponents have emphasized that the Swedish plane might simply be a better alternative. Quicker to learn, easier to fly, far easier to maintain, and easier to operate in a war zone against a peer or more powerful adversary, the Gripen arguably should have been the plane Ukraine went to first before the F-16 was even in consideration. Hindsight, however, can't change the game now. As Sweden continues to roll out more and more copies of the prized Gripen, it'll do so with an eye on the future. Sweden already has a purported 6th-generation fighter in development, more advanced than the American F-22 or F-35 or the Chinese J-20. When it eventually arrives, that aircraft is expected to work alongside loyal wingman drones, integrate sophisticated AI, and boast a negligible radar cross-section. But even after that aircraft, the so-called Flygsystem, enters production, it'll be the Gripen that remains the cornerstone of Swedish air defense in the following years, and it'll be the Gripen that more and more nations around the world are likely to add to their arsenal. How long the Gripen can stand up against the rigors of 21st century combat, it'll be up to that aircraft and its pilots to demonstrate. But if its performance thus far is any indication, Sweden's masterpiece of a fighter jet has got many more decades left in it. Thank you for watching.